The German shepherd's paws cut deep crimson lines into the untouched snow each step, a stubborn declaration against the weakness in his aging body. Striker's breath came ragged and sharp as he stood stiff before the rotting Douglas fir log, his muscular frame trembling not from the bitter -20 cold, but from a pressing urgency that clawed at his soul. His barks shattered the stillness of the Pine Ridge wilderness, echoing against frozen canyon walls like rifle shots, frantic, desperate pleading. Boone McAllister stumbled through knee-deep snow, his weathered features marked by years of hardship and worry. Alzheimer's fog clouded his mind, stealing precious memories even as his loyal companion's cries grew more insistent. "What is it?" Boy Boone's voice cracked against the roaring wind. "What are you smelling that I can't remember?" Striker's old eyes, cloudy with cataracts but burning with fierce purpose, never left the log. His claws ripped at the frozen bark, blood mixing with ice, as though the secrets beneath could save lives. Some truths must be unearthed. Boone had always believed a man's worth was measured by the loyalty of his dog and the weight of his word. At 58, silver threading through his dark braids crow's feet, mapping decades of squinting into Striker's sunrises, he embodied the quiet, unshakable strength his grandfather had instilled on these same reservation lands. The early onset Alzheimer's diagnosis 18 months ago had shattered more than memory. It had threatened to steal his very identity. "Your mind is like a sacred fire," a tribal elder had told him long ago. "Sometimes the wind scatters the flames, but the embers never truly die." Boone clung to those words during moments when he couldn't recall Evelyn McAllister's laugh or Jesse McAllister's face. Striker had been his constant through it all. The 11-year-old German shepherd bore the scars of their 8-year partnership, like badges of honor, a slight limp from the bombing that nearly killed them both, a graying muzzle from countless nights tracking criminals through unforgiving mountains, and eyes that held the wisdom of a creature who had seen humanity at its worst and its best. Their Pine Ridge home sat on 40 acres of ancestral land, a modest cabin where Evelyn had hung dream catchers in every window, where Jesse had learned to track deer before he learned to read. Now it felt far too large for one aging detective, and Striker's shadow carried echoes of laughter Boone sometimes couldn't place, but always felt. Clara May Whitlow had been his salvation. The Lakota woman he'd rescued from an abusive foster home 26 years ago had grown into the daughter he had never expected but desperately needed. At 34, she moved with the grace of her grandmother's bloodline and the determination of someone who had fought for every blessing. Her veterinary practice served both reservation animals and the deep bond between the people and their creatures. Her children were Boone's anchor to the present. 7-year-old Billy Tompkins, whose autism made him see the world differently, communicated more with Striker than with most humans. His sister Daisy Pike, 5, with her father's gentle spirit, had retreated into silence after losing him in a farming accident 2 years prior. Yet she would sit for hours brushing Striker's thick coat, whispering secrets only he could hear. The case of the missing children had haunted the reservation for 6 months. 3 little ones, running wolf, swift, deer, and lone bear, had vanished without a trace. Their disappearances struck terror into every parent's heart. Federal agents had swarmed the area with technology and theories, but it was old-fashioned detective work that had drawn Boone out of forced medical leave. Some tracks can only be read by those who understand the land, he'd told Amos Thatcher, leader of the FBI task force, and some truths can only be found by those willing to listen to what the spirits are trying to tell us. The emergency call came at 4:30 in the morning, cutting through the howling wind like a blade. Boone fumbled for his phone in the darkness, fingers struggling with buttons that seemed to shift under his confused touch. Striker was already alert, ears pricked toward the window, where snow drove sideways across the glass. "Detective McAllister." "This is Sergeant Maud Cartwright at dispatch," the voice crackled. "We got an anonymous tip, sounds from the forest. Crying, maybe screaming." The caller hung up before giving a location, but the signal traced to a cell tower near Sacred Grove. Boone's heart jolted. The ancient burial ground 15 miles northeast of the reservation center, where his ancestors had laid their dead for centuries. It was also the last place anyone had reported tire tracks before Running Wolf disappeared. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Boone said, already reaching for his coat. "Sir, with respect, the Weather Service is calling this a historic blizzard. Wind chill is hitting -30. "The roads. Those children have been missing 6 months, Maud cautioned. "If there's even a chance, I'll take it. Meet me at the highway junction," Boone said, hanging up and glancing at Striker, tail straight and alert. The dog's hip dysplasia made each movement painful, especially in the cold, yet his dark eyes burned with legendary determination. Clara May's truck crunched through the snow just as Boone loaded his gear. She burst through the door, still in surgical scrubs. "You're not going out in this weather," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority inherited from her grandmother. "The temperature drops. Every hour. Roads are already impossible and—" "Dad," she added the word, hanging like a prayer. She had started calling him Dad after Evelyn died, and it never failed to steady his heart. "Your memory's been worse this week. You forgot where you left your badge yesterday. You called me Evelyn 3 times. Boone's voice was gentle, steady. "Clara. May. I know you're scared." "I'm terrified." Her words burst out forceful enough to make Striker's ears flatten. "I can't lose you too. The kids can't lose their grandfather, not when you're all we've got left." Billy Tompkins appeared in the doorway, his small frame swallowed by Boone's heavy coat. The 7-year-old rarely spoke, his autism making words feel foreign in his mouth, yet his bond with Striker transcended language. He stepped straight to the German shepherd and placed his small hand on the dog's massive head. "Striker, protect Grandpa," Billy said clearly, his first full sentence in weeks. "Children need finding." Daisy Pike emerged from behind her brother, clutching a piece of paper. Without a word, she handed it to Boone, a crayon drawing that sent a chill down his spine. It showed a man and a dog walking through snow toward a dark forest. Small figures waiting among the trees. In the corner, she had drawn a circle with lines radiating outward, a sun, or maybe something else entirely. "Clara," May whispered, kneeling beside her daughter. "Where did you see this?" The little girl pointed toward the window, the storm, the sacred grove. Then she did something she hadn't done since her father died. She spoke. "They're cold, Mama. So cold. And they're waiting for Striker to find them." The words struck the room like a physical blow. Clara May went pale. Billy nodded solemnly, as if his sister had confirmed what he'd long suspected. And Striker, he whined low in his throat, pawing at the door with increasing urgency. 20 minutes, Boone said quietly, pulling on his heaviest coat. "That's all I need to check the area. If we don't find anything, we come straight home." Clara May studied her children and Striker's determined stance, glancing at the drawing that seemed to pulse with otherworldly knowledge. 30 minutes, she conceded. "And I'm driving." The ancient Douglas fir stood like a monument to time itself. Its massive trunk, scarred by decades of lightning strikes, hollowed at the core. Snow had drifted around its base in perfect crescents, untouched except for the frantic pawing of Striker's bloodied feet. The German shepherd's behavior had shifted from disciplined alertness to something primal, desperate. Boone stumbled through knee-deep snow ice crystals forming on his mustache, eyes fixed on his partner with mounting concern. Striker dug furiously, defying arthritic joints' claws, scraping frozen bark and packed earth beneath the tree's hollow base. Each movement sent small clouds of breath into the bitter air. Boone saw droplets of blood on the pristine white where Striker's worn pads had torn the surface. "Easy boy," Boone called, but his voice was swallowed by the howling wind. The blizzard had intensified, turning the world into a swirling wall of white visibility dropping to mere feet. Clara May's truck was barely visible 20 yards away, headlights casting twin cones of light that dissolved into the storm. As Boone approached the tree, something caught his eye, a flash of color out of place in the monochrome wilderness. He knelt beside Striker, knees aching from the cold, and brushed snow from where the dog had been digging. His gloved fingers, already numb, touched something that made his heart stop fabric. Red and blue, the kind used in children's winter coats. "Clara May," he shouted over the wind voice cracking with urgency. "Get over here!" The fabric, partially preserved by the cold, was buried just deep enough to shield it from the worst of the storm, yet shallow enough for Striker's extraordinary nose to detect through layers of snow and time. Boone's hands shook as he carefully extracted more material, a small child-sized sleeve, with a distinctive beadwork pattern, traditional stitching he recognized as reservation-made. The memory hit him like a punch, sudden and clear, in a way that had become rare since his diagnosis. He had been here before, years ago, 8 years ago to be exact. The smell of pine sap, wet earth, the wind whistling through the grove, it all rushed back with startling clarity. He had been here with Eli Cormack, his former partner, before everything fell apart. They had been investigating missing tribal artifacts after a tip about grave robbing in sacred areas. Eli had acted strangely that day, nervous in a way Boone had attributed to the delicate nature of disturbing ancestral lands. Now, crouched in the snow with a missing child's coat in his hands, Boone remembered another detail. Eli had marked this location on his map, made sure to note GPS coordinates, insisting they return with better equipment and proper tribal permissions. They never did. A week later, Eli was suspended for taking bribes from drug dealers on the reservation. 2 weeks later, fired and facing federal charges. The artifact case was closed, another dead end in a jurisdiction where too much stayed buried. Striker's whining brought Boone back to the present. The dog pawed at another section of the tree base, digging again. This time, Boone brushed away the snow and discovered fresh scratches in the bark, not weathered by seasons. Someone had been here recently, carving initials into the ancient wood LWRDSB, running wolf, swift, deer, lone bear. The missing children had been here together, and someone had marked their presence like a hunter tagging territory or a collector cataloging prizes. Boone's hands trembled now, and not just from the cold. He pulled out his cell, praying for a signal strong enough to call for backup for the forensics team, for anyone who could help process what Striker had uncovered. But the screen showed nothing. No bars, just the brutal truth of being 15 miles from civilization, in the middle of a historic blizzard. Clara May's voice cut through the storm as she struggled through the snow toward him. "Dad, we have to go. The Weather Service just issued an emergency alert. This storm's worse than they predicted. Maybe 20 minutes before the roads freeze completely," she warned. Boone looked down at the evidence in his hands, then at Striker, still pawing at the snow with relentless focus. The old dog's muzzle was streaked with gray from age, and stress breath labored from exertion and cold, yet his eyes glimmered with an intelligence that went beyond human understanding. Boone held up the small coat sleeve. "Call Amos Thatcher. Tell them we found something." He paused, the name stuck in his throat. Call Eli Cormack. Tell him we need to talk about Sacred Grove. Tell him. I remember everything. The Pine Ridge station buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt since the children first disappeared 6 months ago. Cora Bell. Hannigan, sharp-featured authority in every line of her face, spread crime scene photos across the table, while Boone hunched over bags containing fabric samples and bark scrapings from the grove. This changed everything. We've had search teams comb every inch of that reservation, Cora said, her voice heavy with the months she'd spent on this case. How did we miss this? Boone's fingers traced the edge of the evidence bag, mind struggling to hold the fragments of memory flickering like a dying flame. Sacred Grove isn't just another spot to our people. Tribal law protects it. Federal teams needed special permission to search, and that permission was tied up for months in red tape. You had access, Cora pressed. You could have searched weeks ago. The accusation hung in the cold air like smoke. Boone felt Clara May's hand on his shoulder grounding him. My memory, he said softly. I knew this place was important, but I couldn't remember why not until Striker showed me. Nana Willow, the tribal elder and pediatrician for the missing children, leaned forward, silver braids, glinting hands, weathered from decades of healing. Her dark eyes held fierce intelligence. Perhaps instead of questioning Boone's methods, we should focus on what this evidence tells us, she said, with quiet authority. These children were together. Alive long enough for someone to mark their presence. Whoever took them knows our sacred spots well enough to use them as hiding places. Billy and Daisy sat in the corner, officially present, because Clara May couldn't find childcare on such short notice. But Boone suspected there was more. Daisy had drawn 3 more pictures since their return from Sacred Grove, showing caves' underground spaces, and always Striker leading the way through darkness. The phone rang, cutting the tension. Clara May answered pale as she listened. That's Eli Cormack, she announced. He's coming in. Says he has information about Sacred Grove he should have shared years ago. Boone's heart jumped. Eli, former partner, former friend, brother-in-arms, the man who'd saved his life twice and betrayed him once. The corruption charges hadn't just ruined Eli's career. They shattered a friendship Boone had once thought unbreakable. 20 minutes later, Eli Cormack walked in like a man approaching his own execution. 8 years had not been kind. Crow features, once sharp and proud, now softened a simple ponytail, hinting at a man who had stopped caring about appearances. Eli. Boone said the name rougher than intended. Boone Eli's voice carried decades of shared history and fresh pain. I heard about your diagnosis. I'm sorry. The words hung loaded with all the conversations, never had all the explanations lost to pride and hurt. Cora cleared her throat impatiently. Mr. Cormack, you said you have information on Sacred Grove. We need it now. Eli pulled out a worn manila folder, edges softened by time and handling. 8 years ago, Boone, we were investigating grave robbing on tribal lands. Got a tip someone was disturbing burial sites looking to sell artifacts on the black market. He opened the folder photographs, hand-drawn maps. Evidence showed disturbances at several sites, but Sacred Grove was different. They weren't just taking artifacts, they were using hollowed trees as storage temporary hiding spots. Boone's memories began to snap into place, pieces of the puzzle aligning. You marked GPS coordinates that day. You were nervous about something. Boone's voice was steady, but tension laced every word. I was nervous because I recognized the pattern, Eli Cormack admitted, voice dropping to a whisper. The way the items were stored, the care taken to preserve them. It wasn't random grave robbing, Boone said, his jaw tight. Someone was using our sacred spaces as a systematic storage and distribution network. Nana Willow's eyes narrowed sharp with understanding. Distribution of what she asked. Drugs, Eli said plainly. Heroin, cocaine, later fentanyl. The reservation has limited law enforcement resources, and the sacred sites are off-limits for casual investigation, perfect for someone who knew both our culture and the legal boundaries. Cora Bell Hannigan leaned forward, eyes hard. Are you telling me this operation has been running for 8 years? Longer, Eli admitted. 8 years ago, I got too close to the truth. His hands trembled as he pulled a photograph from the folder. This is my son, Caleb Cormack. He was 16 when he died of a fentanyl overdose. The drugs that killed him came from this network. Silence fell. Outside, the blizzard pounded the reservation. Inside, a chill crept from the weight of revelation. You took bribes, Boone said carefully, voice low. I received money, yes, Eli confessed, but not as bribes. I was buying information, working my way up the chain to find who was running the operation. I was undercover Boone, but I couldn't tell anyone. Not even you. Clara May's voice cut through. Why not? If you were investigating, why not tell your partner? Eli laughed bitterly. Because the operation was protected from the inside. Someone in law enforcement was covering it, making sure evidence disappeared, witnesses silenced. I didn't know who I could trust. Billy Tompkins suddenly stood small legs firm and walked straight to Eli. The 7-year-old, usually silent, looked him in the eyes and spoke clearly. Striker remembers your smell. Good smell. Sad smell. Not bad smell. The words hit Eli like a physical blow. He knelt to the boy's level, tears streaking his weathered cheeks. Your boy has a gift, he said to Clara May. Animals know things we can't. Striker always knew I wasn't the enemy, Eli whispered. Daisy Pike stepped beside her brother, holding one of her drawings. A man kneeling in snow hands, digging face, turned to a dark sky. In the corner, she had drawn a bright star glowing against the night. Hope, she whispered, voice small, but carrying weight. Cora studied the documents Eli provided, face grim. If this is true, this drug network has been operating under federal investigation for nearly a decade. Someone's feeding them information about our operations, Boone realized. Not someone, Eli corrected, voice dropping. Someone with access to federal case files, jurisdiction protocols, search schedules. Someone who could keep certain areas off limits to investigation. Pieces clicked into place for Boone. Memories surged through the fog of Alzheimer's, the sacred site protection orders. Extended, increasingly restrictive approvals delayed. Nana Willow's face had gone ashen. The protection orders came through federal channels, Eli said quietly. We were told it was to prevent desecration of our ancestral lands. It was. But it also gave cover for a criminal operation that exploited our respect for tradition and distrust of federal authority. As if on cue, Striker appeared at the conference room doorway. The German Shepherd had been resting in Boone's office, but now stood alert, ears pricked toward the window, facing Sacred Grove, 15 miles away. The dog whined once, urgent, purposeful. Then his gaze locked on Boone. Eyes holding the weight of 8 years of secrets uncovered together. He knows, Billy said simply. Striker knows where the children are and who has them, Boone murmured. Through the swirling snow, the abandoned hunting cabin materialized like a ghost from another era, built into the hillside 2 miles deeper into the wilderness than Sacred Grove. Forgotten by most, a relic from days when hunters spent weeks tracking elk and deer. Yet Striker led them forward with the certainty of a bloodhound, on a fresh trail, nose low to the ground, despite the blinding conditions. Boone's radio crackled, Cora Bell Hannigan's voice cutting through static. All units, we have visual on the structure, approach with extreme caution. "We don't know what we're walking into," Boone muttered. The Federal tactical team had insisted on taking point, but he and Striker moved alongside them through the dense trees. With every step closer to the cabin, the dog grew more restless muscles, taut senses alert. Steam curled from tiny ventilation holes near the foundation. Someone was definitely inside, keeping warm against the bitter cold. Eli Cormack crouched behind a fallen log 30 yards from the front door service weapon, drawn even though he'd been off the force for 8 years. Cora Bell Hannigan had reluctantly let him accompany the raid team, acknowledging that his knowledge of the terrain and the criminal network made him indispensable. Yet trust between law enforcement and the men was fragile. Through his headset, Tactical Officer Rodriguez reported movement at the east window. "Looks like at least 2 adults. Cannot confirm presence of children from this angle." Boone's heart hammered as he studied the cabin through his binoculars. The structure was bigger than it appeared from a distance, with what seemed to be a basement level built into the hillside. Smoke rose lazily from a stone chimney, and dim light flickered in the windows, kerosene lamps or candles. No electricity. Someone was definitely trying to stay off the grid. Striker went rigid beside him. Every muscle in the German shepherd's body coiled with tension. Ears swiveled toward the cabin, and then to the tree line on their left. Boone followed the gaze, stomach dropping. A figure in winter camouflage moved silently through the pines, carrying what looked like an assault rifle, circling behind the tactical team's position, an ambush in motion. "Contact left," Boone shouted into his radio, but gunfire erupted around them before the words could reach anyone. Bullets hissed through the air, splintering bark, sending sprays of snow into the storm. The tactical team dove for cover. Boone flung himself behind a boulder, yanking Striker down beside him. The German shepherd growled low and warning. "They knew we were coming." Cora's voice crackled over the radio, tight with fury. Someone tipped them off. Boone's mind raced. This wasn't a rescue anymore, it was a trap. Somewhere inside that cabin, 3 missing children were in the crossfire. "Boone basement access." Eli's voice rang out over the gunfire. "Storm cellar entrance on the north side. If the kids are down there, we can get them out without going through the main floor." Cora's tactical team was pinned under automatic fire from at least 3 positions. Surprise was gone. Advantage lost. Boone looked at Striker, dark eyes burning with the same resolve that had carried them through 8 years of perilous missions. "Cover me, Boone," Eli said. "Striker and I are taking the cellar." "No!" Cora shouted, voice breaking with authority. "Wait for backup! This is exactly what they want. Split our forces." But Boone was already moving, staying low, as he and Striker sprinted through the trees toward the north side of the cabin. Bullets buzzed past like angry hornets, yet the dog never faltered powerful legs propelling him through deep snow, despite the pain Boone knew he felt. The storm cellar door was exactly where Eli had said. A heavy wooden barrier locked with a modern padlock seemed out of place on the rustic structure. Voices came from below, muffled but human. One small voice cried out, "A child." Striker dug frantically at the base claws, scraping frozen earth. Boone drew his service weapon and shot the padlock. The gunshot vanished into the storm. A set of wooden steps led down into darkness. The stench of unwashed bodies' fear and something chemical drugs' desperation rose to his nose. Police Boone called down. "If there are children down there, we're here to help." A small, weak voice answered unmistakably. "Young, help us, please, we're scared." Boone clicked on his flashlight and began down the steps. Striker pressing close against his legs. The basement had been converted into a makeshift prison sleeping bags on dirt floors, buckets for toilets. In the far corner, huddled together for warmth, were 3 small figures: Running Wolf, Swift Deer, and Lone Bear. Alive. Frightened. Malnourished, but alive. Boone exhaled in relief, holstering his weapon and moving toward them. "It's okay, kids. You're safe now. I'm Detective Boone McAllister, and this is Striker. We're here to take you home." The children's eyes, haunted by too much hardship, brightened when they saw Striker. The German Shepherd approached slowly, tail wagging low and gentle, soft whines, escaping as he tried to comfort them. The dog found Running Wolf first, the 8-year-old Lakota boy, gaunt, but with eyes sparking with the same fire that made him a leader among his peers. "I prayed to my grandfather's spirit to send help," the boy whispered. "The spirit sent us a dog. Swift Deer." A 10-year-old Cherokee girl reached out tentatively to touch Striker's massive head relief washing over her small features. We knew someone would come. We never stopped believing. Lone Bear, the youngest at 9, wrapped his small arms around Striker's neck, burying his face in the dog's thick winter coat. "We were so cold," he whispered, "but we stayed together, just like our parents taught us." Boone felt icy tears freeze on his cheeks as he helped the children to their feet. They were weak, but mobile, and more importantly, they carried the resilience that had carried their ancestors through centuries of hardship. "Can you walk?" he asked gently. "We need to get you out of here now." The gunfire above them intensified, and Boone could hear voices shouting closer. Whoever ran this operation was making a last stand, and Boone needed to move these children to safety before the situation deteriorated further. "Striker will lead the way," Boone instructed. "Stay close to him, and he'll get you out safely." As they began toward the steps, Running Wolf grabbed Boone's arm. "Detective," he said urgently, "there are other children. They took them last week, but they're coming back tonight. You have to stop them." The words hit Boone like ice water. This wasn't the end of the rescue, it was only the beginning. Then, without warning, Striker collapsed. His powerful legs gave out at the top of the storm cellar steps. The German Shepherd's breathing grew shallow and ragged pink foam forming at the corners of his mouth. Boone dropped to his knees beside him, hands trembling as he searched for a pulse beneath the thick winter coat. No, he whispered, voice cracking, feeling Striker's heart thumping erratically beneath his palm. "Not now, boy. Not when we're so close." The three children huddled around them, faces etched with the kind of fear born from watching hope slip away. Running Wolf placed his small hand on Striker's heaving side and looked up at Boone with the wisdom of someone far beyond his 8 years. "He's dying for us," the boy said simply. "Like a warrior. Like my grandfather in the old stories." Gunfire around the cabin intensified Cora Bell Hannigan's voice crackling over Boone's radio with increasingly desperate updates. "We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. They've got us surrounded. Where are you with those children?" Boone keyed the radio with one hand, the other still pressed against Striker's chest. "We have the kids, but Striker is down. He's in cardiac distress. I need an immediate medical evacuation." Negative on the evac. Cora's response came sharp and urgent. "The entire area is compromised. Shooters in the trees and the weather's grounding all aircraft. Get those children to the rally point now." Swift Deer, the 10-year-old Cherokee girl, knelt beside Striker and began singing softly in her native tongue, a death song her grandmother had taught her to guide spirits safely to the other side. The haunting melody broke Boone's heart into pieces. Lone Bear, despite his young age, seemed to understand with the clarity that sometimes comes in moments of crisis. "He saved us," the boy said, voice steady despite tears. "Striker saved us, just like he saved all the others." Boone felt the fog of Alzheimer's creeping in at the worst moment memories and clarity slipping away when he needed them most. He couldn't remember the route back to the vehicles, the radio protocols, nothing except that these children had to get home safely. Striker's eyes locked onto Boone's, piercing through the confusion like a blade. For a fleeting moment, the dog's breathing steadied his tail, managing a weak wag. In that look, Boone saw 8 years of partnership, loyalty, and love distilled into one perfect instant of understanding. "I know," Boy Boone whispered, voice cracking. "I know you want to finish the job, but you've done enough, more than enough." A fresh volley of gunfire erupted from the cabin, followed by screams that made Boone's blood run cold. Through his radio, he heard Cora shouting orders fragmented through static and the chaos of battle. "Officer down. Officer down." Medical support needed immediately. The children pressed closer to Striker, small hands stroking his fur as his breathing grew labored. Daisy Pike's prophetic drawing flashed in Boone's mind, the dog and man in snow darkness all around, yet a star shining in the corner. Detective McAllister Eli Cormac's voice cut through the radio static, clear and urgent. "Second team moving in from the east. They're not law enforcement. Repeat, they're unknown hostiles approaching your position." Boone's mind raced through fragmenting thoughts and memories. The children needed to get to safety. Striker couldn't move. The cabin was surrounded by armed men expecting them, and somewhere in the chaos, more children were at risk, the ones Running Wolf had said would arrive tonight. With supreme effort, Striker lifted his head. His dark eyes locked onto something in the tree line Boone couldn't yet see. A low growl rumbled in the dog's chest, barely audible, but full of the last reserves of his protective instinct. "What is it, boy?" Boone whispered, following Striker's gaze. Movement flickered in the shadows between the pines. "What do you see?" Swift Deer stopped singing and gripped Boone's arm with surprising strength. "He sees the truth," she said, her young voice carrying the weight of generations. "Striker sees what we cannot, the real enemy, this one." Through the swirling snow and smoke of gunfire, a figure emerged from the tree line. Not one of the criminals they'd been pursuing, not one of the tactical team, but someone Boone recognized, a shock that nearly stopped his heart. Cora Bell Hannigan moved with deadly precision through the trees, military training evident in every step. In her hands, not a service pistol, but a military-grade assault rifle. Striker growled low, using strength he shouldn't have had, warning Boone one last time. The loyal German shepherd had known all along who the true enemy was, trying to communicate it through every blocked search warrant, every sabotaged operation. The inside protection for the drug network wasn't some faceless bureaucrat. It had been the lead agent herself. The truth hit Boone like a sledgehammer. Each revelation clicked into place with brutal clarity, piercing the fog of Alzheimer's that usually clouded his thoughts. Cora wasn't coming to help. They were moving to eliminate the witnesses who had discovered too much. "Kids, get behind that tree," Boone whispered urgently, pointing toward a massive pine trunk for cover. "Stay low. Don't move until I say." As the children scrambled to safety, Striker summoned one final heroic effort. The dying dog found the strength to lift himself, positioning between Boone and the approaching threat. His legs shook, but his stance was unmistakable, the protective posture he'd maintained through 8 years of partnership. Morris and Boone called weapon drawn, but trembling. "That's far enough." Cora's laugh was cold and bitter as she stepped into the clearing assault rifle trained on Boone's chest. "Really, Detective McAllister, you're going to arrest a federal agent for doing her job." "Your job?" Boone's voice cracked with rage and disbelief. "Your job was to find these children, not orchestrate their kidnapping. My job," Cora said, her tone explaining simple facts to a child, is to manage a delicate operation generating millions annually, funding dozens of federal anti-terror initiatives that Congress refuses to support. The puzzle pieces fell into place with horrifying logic. "You've been running drugs through the reservation," Boone said, "using the sacred sites as distribution points. The protection orders, the blocked search warrants, the delayed investigations, that was all you. The remote location, limited law enforcement, cultural restrictions, and a population already distrustful of government authority, the reservation had been perfect. Poverty made recruitment easy." Eli Cormac's voice came through Boone's radio static, but audible. "Boone, where are you? Federal backup is on the way, but something's wrong." Cora ignored the radio, smiling coldly. Poor Eli, she thought he'd come so close to figuring it out 8 years ago. "That's why he had to be discredited," Boone said, finger tightening on his weapon. "You planted evidence of bribery to destroy his credibility." "I saved his life," Cora corrected. If he'd kept investigating, he would have ended up like his son. Caleb Cormac's overdose wasn't accidental, detective. It was a message. The words hit Boone like physical blows. Anger flared in his chest, vision reddening, heart hammering. "You killed a 16-year-old boy." "I eliminated a liability," she said coldly. Caleb was asking too many questions about where his father's money came from. "Teenagers can't be trusted with secrets." Behind the tree, Running Wolf whispered urgently to the other children in Lakota. Boone couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the cadence of a protective prayer, his grandfather's cadence. Striker swayed on his feet, but held his ground eyes locked on Cora. His breathing grew labored, but loyalty never wavered. Boone gestured toward the children hiding behind the pine. "What was their purpose in your operation?" he demanded. Cora's expression shifted, revealing the first crack in her icy facade. "They weren't supposed to be taken," she admitted. "Local recruits overstepped. Children draw attention, create heat. They were supposed to be eliminated weeks ago. Eliminated." The word tasted like poison in Boone's mouth. "You're talking about murdering children. I'm talking about protecting a multi-million-dollar operation that funds national security initiatives you couldn't even imagine," Cora Bell Hannigan snapped. "Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good." "The greater good." Boone's voice rose, cracking with rage. "You destroyed Eli Cormac's life. You killed his son. You've been poisoning our community with drugs for years. And you call that the greater good?" Through his radio, Boone heard vehicles approaching through the storm. Real backup was coming, but Cora heard it too. Her grip tightened on her assault rifle as her window of opportunity closed. "Last chance, detective," she said, voice returning to icy professionalism. "Walk away. Take early retirement. Forget what you've seen here. In exchange, I guarantee these children will return safely to their families." Boone glanced at Striker, whose dark eyes held a clarity that cut through every doubt, every fear, every fog Alzheimer's had brought. His partner of 8 years was dying, but still fighting, still protecting, still believing in their mission. "Counteroffer," Boone said steadily. "You drop your weapon, surrender to federal custody, and spend the rest of your life in prison thinking about every life you've destroyed." Cora's finger moved to the trigger. A gunshot echoed through the forest, but it wasn't hers. Eli Cormac emerged from the tree line behind her service weapon, smoking 8 years of grief and rage etched on his face. "That's for my son," he said quietly, watching Cora crumple into the snow. "And for every child whose life you poisoned with your so-called greater good." Striker collapsed exhausted, but managed a last weak wag as he saw his family safe. Boone dropped to his knees, gathering the loyal German shepherd into his arms, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Good boy," he whispered. "Good boy, Striker. You did it. You saved them all." Sirens wailed through the forest as real federal agents secured the scene. Boone held his dying partner, while 3 children emerged from behind the pine alive, safe, and ready to go home to families who had never stopped believing. 6 months later, late spring sunlight streamed through the windows of Clara May Whitlow's expanded home, illuminating a scene that would have seemed impossible back in December. The house buzzed with warmth as multiple generations gathered around a dinner table, extended twice to fit everyone now calling this place family. Boone sat at the head of the table, memory sharper than it had been in years. Doctors couldn't explain the improvement in his Alzheimer's symptoms, but Nana Willow had her own theories about the healing power of purpose and a life well lived. His silver Cherokee braids glimmered in the sunlight, eyes clear with the peace of a man reconciled with his legacy. "Tell us the story again, Grandpa Boone," Daisy Pike said, voice bright and confident, still amazing those who remembered her as the silent little girl. At 5, she had become family historian, insisting on every detail until she could recite it perfectly. "Which part do you want to hear, little star?" Boone asked, the nickname from her prophetic drawings sticking through the years. "The part where Striker saved us all," Billy Tompkins said, speaking in full sentences that now flowed naturally, "and the part where Eli Cormack became a hero again." Eli looked up from his place at the table, humbled by his inclusion. The federal investigation had cleared him of all corruption charges, revealing him as an undercover hero whose 8 years of sacrifice had brought down one of the largest drug trafficking operations in the Pacific Northwest. He had declined reinstatement to the police force, a federal post, and other offers, choosing instead to help Clara May manage the expanded animal rescue operation that had grown from her clinic. "Your grandpa Boone and Striker were the real heroes," Eli said quietly, voice carrying the humility of a man granted a second chance at redemption. At Eli's feet, a young German shepherd named Whiskey Grandson of the legendary Striker practiced the same alert posture that had made his grandfather famous. The puppy had remarkable intelligence and instinctively knew when people needed comfort, spending his days rotating between rescued children and elderly reservation residents. Clara May moved between kitchen and dining room with the grace of someone living her true calling. Her veterinary practice had evolved into a comprehensive healing center treating animals and the trauma that so often accompanied them. Federal grants had funded the expansion part of the reparations for the 11-year-old and thriving children, ensuring Striker's spirit lived on. Running Wolf, now 9, nodded seriously. "My grandmother says when animals give their lives to protect others, their spirits stay close to watch over their families." Striker's spirit lived in all of them. Lone Bear, the youngest of the rescued children, bonded especially with Billy, and the 2 boys now spent afternoons teaching Whiskey the tracking games that Striker had once mastered. "Tell about the part where the bad lady went to jail forever," Daisy piped up, eager to hear justice finally delivered. Lone Bear spoke with the fierce satisfaction of a child who had seen justice served. Boone's expression grew serious as he addressed this part of the story. Cora Bell Hannigan had been sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. Her sprawling drug trafficking network dismantled dozens of co-conspirators arrested. The case had prompted reforms in federal oversight of reservation law enforcement and new protocols to prevent exploitation that had thrived for so long. "Justice isn't just about punishment," Boone said carefully, aware that the children were listening intently. "It's about making sure what happened to you can never happen to any other child. Cora made choices that hurt many people, and now she has to live with the consequences for the rest of her life." Nana Willow, who had become a regular guest at these family dinners, raised her glass of iced tea in a toast. To Striker, she said, voice, carrying the reverence of someone who understood the sacred nature of sacrifice, and to all the spirits guiding us toward truth and justice. To Striker, everyone echoed, including the 3 rescued children who had insisted on joining every family celebration since their return. Billy Tompkins stood from his chair, measured and deliberate as always. "I have something to say," he announced, voice clear and strong. "Before Striker, I couldn't talk to people. My words were stuck inside me like trapped in a box. But Striker showed me that love doesn't need words," he continued. "Love is just being there when someone needs you." Daisy Pike nodded wisely. "Mama Clara May says that's why we're all family now, not because we share the same blood, but because we choose to be there for each other." As if summoned by the moment, Whiskey appeared at Boone's side, the young dog's tail wagging as he sensed the emotional undercurrents in the room. Boone reached down, scratching behind the puppy's ears, feeling the same spark of connection he had shared with his legendary partner. "Some bonds," Boone said, voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom, transcend everything time memory, even death itself. "Striker taught me that love isn't something you lose when your mind begins to fail." Boone continued. "It lives in your heart, in your actions, in the way you choose to show up for the people who matter most." Clara May appeared beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. And sometimes she added, looking around the table at their unlikely but unbreakable family, "Love grows bigger than you imagined possible, like a candle lighting other candles, creating more light instead of less." Outside, the sun set over the Pine Ridge Reservation, painting the sky in gold and crimson. In the distance, Sacred Grove, where 3 children had been found, stood peaceful and protected, a testament to the truth that the greatest victories often come not from force or technology, but from the simple, profound loyalty between a man and his dog. There is something profoundly beautiful about watching a family choose each other. Following Boone Striker and their extended family through this journey reminds us that the most precious moments aren't grand gestures. They are quiet. Sunday dinners, 3 generations gathered around a table, rescued children laughing freely, an old man's fading memory bolstered by unwavering love, and the assurance that we matter, that our legacy lives on, and that love transcends every obstacle life throws our way. Boone found his purpose even as Alzheimer's threatened his identity. Clara May discovered that family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up when everything falls apart. And Striker proved that loyalty once given never truly dies. In a world that often renders elders invisible, this story reminds us that our wisdom, experience, and capacity to love are not diminished by time. They are refined, made more precious, more essential. What moment in this story reminded you most of your own family's journey? Have you experienced the kind of unexpected bonds that Boone and Clara May discovered?